Hi, and welcome to the second installment of the Low Impact webinar series. And this time we're going to look into how to identify dynamic values, what they are, and how to find them and use them. Dynamic values are often used for keeping your sessions safe and identified, or in the next step of a user workflow. And we're going to spend some time today on finding them and using them in your test scripts. We're going to be building on the last webinar's starting point. So that's where we're going to kick off with a very, very quick recap of the use case we did. And then we're going to start working from that point. So let's start off. Here we have my account in Low Impact. I'm logged in. Let's take a quick recap of the use case of what we have. And it's quite important that it's our favorite airline again. We're going to book a search for tickets. And it's quite important when you start working with this that you have a good understanding of your application, your use case. And if you didn't take part in building it, have access to developers, architects, DBAs, what have you, which will save you a lot of time rather than trying to reverse engineer. But sometimes you'll have to resort to that, and that's what we're going to spend some time doing. Now, this was the use case. We had the recording. We're looking into just departure, destination, search for dates, and this was it. And then we had a script recorded, and I'm going to take a look into the results from that last recording so we can see if we are familiar with this. This was the result. The script we have a little bit shaped up. We have entered sleep times. We have named the transactions nice names. And you can see we have a lot of posts in here with lots of data. So what do we do now? Well, if I run this, it will probably not produce the results I expect. So let's see if we have anything that might seem to be dynamic or that needs reuse. Usually that shows up in posts. And the first post is here. In a transaction, we named select departure because it's the step we do. And when we look into those very, very minute details here, we see the data we're posting. Event argument, event target, that looks pretty much constant. Event validation, that's very long and seems completely random. That's probably some encoded value of something. And for those of you familiar with building Microsoft Forms web apps, it actually passes a lot of event validation and view states back and forth to keep track of your selections and how your session is doing and keeping everything up to date as you move along. Here we have the view state, also a very long, seemingly random, but okay, we have something that's event validation here. So let's just search for event validation and see if we have more. Well, we have one there. And then we have another one in the next post that's different. And we have one in the next one that's different. And one in the next, and they're all different. Okay, that means they change as we move along in our use case. Okay, it might seem important then we can assume it's dynamic. And if you build Microsoft applications like this, you know it's dynamic. So your developers could probably tell you you're going to have to find and use these uniquely for every execution of your test script. View states and event validations, all such things. Sometimes it's session data or parameters or what have you. So how do I find out where this value comes from? It wasn't teleported from the moon. It was from somewhere. And I need to find out where is that somewhere. and then I need to utilize that later. So how do I find out that somewhere? Well, let's assume it's from some type of response from a previous request, because it has to come from somewhere. So we don't have many requests up here. We have the default page, a few statics, JavaScript, images, etc. We're getting the booking page up there. So let's get a different type of recording which has all the different details, and let's use what we call the developer mode in the browser to help us finding that, because that can pick up every little minute detail. I'll just bring up another browser for use of this. All browsers, Chrome, Firefox, all of them have all these things. So let's go to our favorite airline, because this is the use case we did. We're going to do the same use case in a slightly different manner. And when we want to bring up developer mode, we press F12. It's actually the same in Firefox, Chrome, and Edge, which this is. And we need to go to the network recording, and then we make sure it's recording, and we can say, oh yes, it did. We loaded some style sheets there already. Okay, let's go here and execute our use case. Well, we go to the starting page. That's a starting point. Then we go to book flights, select the destination, or departure rather. We select a destination, a departure date, a destination date, and we click search. And now we go back to the develop. It has all your requests here and all the stuff in them. So let's stop recording so we don't get any extra stuff. And now we need to find out this dynamic data that we were looking for. And let's go into the script and see, well, it was when we selected departure, we post to booking, and we post all this stuff. Okay, let's find that in here. Okay, let's see, get. Well, let's see, we're not interested in all the style sheets and scripts and media. We're just interested in documents. So that makes our world a lot easier. And we see, oh, post to booking. That seems to be the thing we were looking for. So let's bring out this view. Let's see what we actually, the request body. We posted event validation and use date, and there are these very long strings. And if we just take a very quick look, we see it doesn't really look the same as this. No, it's definitely different every time you do it. So let's go back to this view. It changes every time. So we can safely assume it's a dynamic value that we need to pick up and reuse. So this was the post where we actually posted this to the server. Now, where did it come from? Well, let's do a little bit of investigation. Let's see if we can copy that value, the very ridiculously long string here. And well, let's go to the previous step. Usually a good place to start, and get. And here we have the response to the get. And we suspect in here we have this very long string somewhere. So let's use the search. And I just pasted all of it in there, and I'm just going to cut off something. Just want to have the beginning of it to find it. And it seems it's in here. When we look for it, in its event validation, input type hidden. And since it's in here, looks like this, we now know that in the response from the previous request, the value of event validation gets sent to us. So we can pick that up and reuse it in the post, the next step. That's very good to know. Now, I noticed up here we have view state. Looks the same. It's also hidden. So both view state and event validation are in here in the response from the request that was done before the post. Okay, now we know where it came from. So let's go back and update the script. What do we need to do then? Well, we know it came from this particular request to the booking page. And I need to get the event validation out of the response from that and put it in here. How do I do that? Well, a few things to do, keep track of. I'll set something up here, a response. I want to keep the response and get the response back. And I actually want some content, and this is important to remember. I have to set the size of this content. If I just set it to some arbitrarily big size, well, that might not be big enough. Let's assume I have very big pages. And get the response back. Now, this means I will keep the content of this response in this variable. And I know my event validation is in there, and how do I get it out of there? Well, there are a number of different ways, and we're going to look into a few different depending on what your favorite mode of working is. Give you a few different options. And let's enter here, and let's do a few things. I'm going to set up, well, let's just, what are we looking for? Event validation. I'm naming it like this. And the most common way to get stuff out like this is to treat everything as text, because it is. So we can do regular expressions. Regular expressions are highly efficient, very fast, but can be rather complex to create sometimes. But for these things, they're a very, very good and efficient way of doing it. So the language Lia has a lot of cool things built in. One is the string match, and I want the response. And actually the response here is a table of responses for all these requests in the request batch, but I only want the first one. So response 1. And what do I want? I don't want the headers, I don't want any other stuff, I want the body. So in that, I want to find event validation. So let's do that. And how does it look? Well, let's go back here and see what I'm supposed to look for. It's something like this. Let's just copy this. Event validation and a little bit of that. And copied, and go back here and see if we got that. Whoa, that was the full string, that was not the purpose. Let's see what we can do here. Let's get that. See if I can copy properly here. See if my copying skills are up to par. Here we go. This is what it looks like. And then we had value equals. And then we had this very, very, very long string of data, and it ends like this. Let's terminate, and like this. In here, there is this very long string of data that we need to extract. How do we do that? Well, in regular expression speak, we do a capture, and we don't make it greedy, and everything between the double quotes here will be captured in our variable. So we seem to have that in place, and let's just make sure it works. Let's do a little bit of debugging. And we don't want to run anything more. This is slightly extra. Return end means it stops there. Util pprint quickly prints the output. For a line of text, it doesn't really matter, but it can actually print well-formatted tables and stuff, save some time. Okay, here I probably did some type of syntactic mistake. Well, did I? I have to look close. Yes, something is missing here. Didn't get the syntax right, and I can see I didn't do that there either. So let's go. And it logged nil. That wasn't really funny. You can see here, my log message here, it's empty. I didn't get the event validation from in there. So let's find out what I possibly did wrong here. I misspelled the name of validation. And it's supposed to be, let's just make sure it's the correct. Quirk of layer, it's not strongly typed. Another nice thing, or not so nice thing with layer, is that you can use single or double quotes to enclose strings, which means you don't need to escape them, which is very convenient when you're looking for double and single quotes. So let's do the validation again and see if we can find the event validation in here. Here we go. We log this very, very long. This looks like an event validation. Terribly long. Now, the other thing we needed to find was view state. And it's up here and looks exactly the same in the format. So let's be lazy. Let's do this. Let's view state. And let's print it. Make sure we get it. And validation output. It looks like we got something for view state as well. Seems to get correct values. Now we have extracted dynamic values, so I can remove that. We don't need to keep track. Now I have found them. I have extracted them. How do I use them? Well, you replace the content in the post with the value. So let's do that. I end the string and I concatenate, and I want to put event validation in there. Let's put event validation in there. And okay, how do I know where it ends? It ends right there with the ampersand. That's the end of that parameter. So let's just replace all this with the value of event validation. Here we go. Start string. So the double dots concatenate or add strings together, and we have put event validation in there. Now, if we take a quick look here in the header that was recorded, it says content type form URL encoded. This means all the data that is posted here must be escaped or URL encoded. So we need to do escape the parameter itself when we put it in there, or it won't be in the correct format. Let's put the view state in there as well and see where does that end. Where's the next ampersand? Let's put stuff in there that we want. View state, concatenate together with the escape value of state. And where is the end of the view state? There. So let's remove that. Here we go. Now we have used the dynamic values of view state and event validation in the post, which means it should post correctly. And that ends the transaction. Let's just find out if it works. We'll stop right there, not move any further, and let's validate that. It's a good thing to sort of validate as you move on extracting these things. It can be slightly tricky since it has to be correct to the detail. Validation finished, everything is just fine. Excellent. Let's move further down then. Move that. Next post, new data for event validation. We have view state. Okay. And it was not the same, so we can assume it's from the previous request, which is there. We can go back to this and just make sure, well, this is also a post. And what are we posting? Well, the request is posting event validation is here. Would it possibly be from the response here? Well, yes, here's the event validation. It's from the previous response. So we can do the same thing again for this, but rather than, and it's very convenient just using the same method of extraction, but just to give some variety, for those of you who are really into regular expressions and the high efficiency of those, the built-in regular expressions here in LIA are not 100% full implementation. So if you want to use 100% full implementations of regular expressions, we actually provide that as a separate function library. And it's slightly different to use. So what I'm going to do is that I will pop out of this version and go into a previously saved version of the script because it's a little bit time consuming to do everything manually. But if we go into this, you can see we have the same things. We have the nicely named transactions. This is the same script, but I have completed it. Here we have the event validation and the view state and the expressions extracting them, and we're using them. And as you would expect, we get the response from that request and make sure we have enough space to hold it. And now we use the regular expressions in a different way. Now we use the full regular expression. And what this is gives you all the captures. And it's slightly different syntactical, but it's very easy to use as well. And all these functions are in the API documentation. You can find them up here. It will open a new window for you, including all the different functions that you can access inside the script. And they're all here. For example, we have regular expressions and all how it's used. So let's go back here and see what we do. We have regular expressions and we have the string view state that you remember, and we have a capture. The capture looks slightly different. If you look up here, it's the LIA capture means it's not greedy, and in this it's a full regular expression, which means it will be greedy until the double quote. It produces the same result, and as this regular expression can find many matches, I just want the first one. Now, another layer thing, everything starts with 1, nothing starts with 0. In many languages, every table order starts with 0, and in Lua it starts with 1. And for the captures in regular expression, the first capture is actually what you're asking for. It's what you're looking for. And the second capture is actually this one, the value, the closure you're looking for. And we're digging out view state and event validation in the same way. And if we look at how it's used, we use it the same way. And since we know we have more of these later coming in, event validation, this is completed, we have opted to show a slightly different way to access these values. If you're a web developer, you might not feel confident using regular expressions or handling strings, and sometimes you can have a whole bunch of different values that match, and it can be very difficult to sort out the one you want, especially using regular expressions. So it can be much easier to work with the document object model in the web that you're testing. So you might want to use CSS queries or XPath queries to actually find what you're looking for. Now, the developer mode of the web browsers helps us do that as well. So we're going to look into that as a slight extra bonus. And let's change the browser to a different one just for fun. Let's bring up another Chrome window. Let's do our favorite airline website. You should know it by now. If I go to book flights, let's do something like this, and let's go to developer mode, and let's preserve the log so we keep, and let's do this. And let's see what we got. We got the post and a response and a view state. And let's see what we can do. And let's do this. Let's inspect, which will bring it up nicely in Chrome. And in here, we have all the stuff we need. Here we have hidden values, view state. And if I right-click this, we can copy in here, we can copy the selector, which is the CSS query, or the XPath to actually access this. But let's start with a CSS query. We copied that. I got it right. Let's go back to the browser and see what. Just paste that in there. And the entire CSS query for the view state is actually the identity of view state. Interesting. Now, how do we use that? Well, we can do something that's called CSS query in the scripting API here. So and it will return a node. And let's get the node from the CSS query, and the query itself recopied from the developer mode of Chrome, in this case here. So let's show that again. Copy selector, and then we can paste that selector in here. And as you can see, I've already used that one. How do we use this query? Well, what we're looking for, where we're looking for it, and as you can see here, I actually enter response 1. If you look here, we get body, but I don't need to tell it to use the body. It will use the entire response. But I still need to set the response body bytes to save them. So, and the response, and then I add this parameter, get a single match from the query. This means that we get a single node back and not an iterator of how many nodes I can find, because I'm only looking for one view state. So I get a single node, and a single node that contains, well, what does it contain? Let's take a quick look in here. Let's take a quick look on how to use that. Well, I can do CSS query, how to do the query, what it returns. It returns node. Let's look at what node is. It's an alias. Okay, then we have the node here, and it contains attributes, children, content, and name. Okay, let's see what we're using. We actually want the value because that's the view state. So instead of actually doing a regular expression on the text content, we do a CSS query and extract it like that. Now, to make it slightly more useful for those of you who are not familiar with CSS queries but prefer XPath queries, we can do exactly the same thing. Go to the developer mode, and we can extract. Let's see where we can get event validation. It's here we have event validation. Let's look for event validation, copy the XPath, and the XPath would look something like this then. It's /*ID event validation. That will bring you that node. This is what I've used, and this is slightly different. Here we have to pass the content of the response. As before, we don't need to identify the body, just the entire response. I use HTML pass, and I get a document back. This is an XML document of the page. And what do I do with that document? I do an XPath query on the document, searching for this event validation, and I just want a single match. And I get the node back, and I pick out the value for event validation. Now I have found two different ways, rather than regular expressions, to extract the content: the CSS query and the XPath query. These can be much more convenient to work with when you're looking for contents of drop-down list box, or responses you get back from servers, or things you need to extract from the page. It can be much more convenient rather than working with regular expressions. And when I use them just like before. And that's sort of the same way of doing it all through the script. And as I have prepared this before, let's just validate and see that it works. And yes, validation finished. It works fine. So let's stick that into a test and make sure it works with 5 users. That seems nice. Let's do that. Airline 1, that was last week's or last time. B2 was the new version. So let's drop that. Run it from my preferred doublet. 5 users. Nice test. And let's just run the test to see what it looks like. Make sure we can get the dynamic values here. So, in summary, what we've done is we've looked into what dynamic values might be, what they might look like. In this case, pretty straightforward. They were in the responses from the previous requests. They can be in headers, cookies, wherever, other types of script content, etc. Especially in more modern designs where you actually push updated scripts in single-page apps, etc. But the browser's developer mode is a very good place to go looking for these. And we use those. We use some regular expressions to extract them and use them in the subsequent posts. We used different methods of accessing them. We used CSS queries or export queries, which might be more convenient if you're more familiar with that. And then we are now running a test as soon as we get up and running here. Make sure it executes properly. While we were waiting for that to start, I will say this. Next time, we're going to look into using data stores and parameters to make your tests data-driven. This means you can do logins unique per user and not log in the same user every time. You can use data to do selections and etc. And next time it's making this test data-driven. And as we can see, we are running this test now. It looks just fine. We have the same sort of intelligent content here. Front page, 2 bookings, select departure seems reasonable. Let's add a graph for the front page. Now we have select destination. Let's go back to the main screen. Let's add that. Looks good. Response times. Now we're up to 5 users. We have the different URLs that are requested in the test. They all look fine. And next time, as I said, we're going to be looking into making tests data-driven. And next time after that, when we have a test set up using dynamic values, being data-driven, everything to model real-world users as close as possible, we'll start looking into analyzing results. But that's a little bit away. This time, dynamic values. Next time, data-driven. And next time again, we'll start to look into results. So for now, I say thank you and welcome back.